Conservative Chief Justice John Roberts, in his majority opinion to end Biden's student loan debt relief program, had cited someone unexpected by most, certainly expected by myself and progressives, ex-House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. So now Roberts had cited comments, in his opinion, she made during a press conference with reporters on July 28th of 2021. So, again, if you don't remember this or you haven't heard this, here's Pelosi on whether or not the president can forgive debt.
People think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
Whoopsie.
Yeah. Okay. So now, obviously, Nancy Pelosi's wrong. And by the way, she later came out to support Biden's plan, but the damage is already done. And I'm going to explain why she was wrong the entire time. And I've said it before, and I've gotten criticized by Democrats for saying that she was wrong at the time. Well, first, let me give you her more current comments about it, at least as of last year, 2022. She said, on Twitter, POTUS bold action is a strong step in Democrats' fight to expand access to higher education. POTUS, by delivering historic targeted student debt relief to millions of borrowers, more working families will be able to meet their kitchen table needs as they recover from the pandemic. So now that was a correct take. Now, where do you think conservatives, well, obviously we already know what conservatives jumped on and quoted because they used her words, in his opinion, Roberts did, to sink debt relief for 40 million Americans. Hey, Nancy, good job. Well done. Now, again, I've talked about how she's wrong, the court is wrong. Here's why. So now, she says it takes an act of Congress. Well, what do you think the HEROES Act was? 2003, the HEROES Act passed through Congress, says that the Secretary of Education may waive, or modify any statutory or regulatory provision related to federal student loans as may be necessary to ensure that borrowers are not placed in a worse position financially because of a national emergency. COVID was a national emergency. And again, this wasn't completely canceling out the debt. This was waiving a portion of it if you have received, this is all public debt owed to the federal government, waiving a portion of it if you have received Pell Grants, which is, again, part of the Pell Grant program. It was entirely under his authority. Now, as Justice Elena Kagan wrote in her dissent, quote, the question the majority maintains is who has the authority to decide whether such a significant action should go forward. The right answer is the political branches, Congress in broadly authorizing loan relief, which happened, the Secretary and the President in using that authority to implement the forgiveness plan, which the Supreme Court did not allow to go forward because they intervened on some pretty, flimsy pretenses, I should say. The HEROES Act, again, passed by Congress, but Kagan noted that the majority instead says that instead of Congress, who again passed the HEROES Act, the president told the Secretary of Education to waive a certain portion or gave him the power to, waive some of this debt. The Supreme Court stepped in and said, no, this is our decision. We're going to decide whether or not you can actually do this. What does that sound like to me? Judicial activism. Legislating from the bench. Okay? Limiting the president's power because, in my view, he's a member of the opposing party who was trying to use the law as it was to help people as it was supposed to do during a time of an emergency. That's it. Now, here's the other thing, right? So the government didn't have any problem, and the right wingers too, they didn't have any problem with the government during COVID issuing paycheck protection loans. You know, again, this was during an emergency. These businesses borrowed money from the government. Okay. And so, you know, it was in order to cover things during this emergency. A lot of big businesses took advantage of this, and the government still forgave a crap ton of these loans. So if they could do that, why can't they, you know, forgive during that same emergency that authorized them to, you know, give all these loans to businesses, which then were forgiven? Why can't they do it for students? Well, because they didn't want to. I think that's pretty obvious. The majority of recipients of PPP loans were gigantic businesses. And of course, the majority of those people who would have their loans forgiven are low-income minorities. In fact, the New York Fed paper back from January noted that those who would stand to benefit the most from the debt payback holiday were younger, have lower credit scores, and live in lower income neighborhoods. So, you know, they also noted that these people would have widespread payment difficulties if payments were to resume without relief. Well, and unfortunately, that's what's going to happen as far as I know. So now, one last thing. To get back to Nancy Pelosi for a second. Remember when she said we needed a strong Republican Party? Well, let me just remind you that this is what a strong Republican Party gets you. It gets you nominations to the Supreme Court. 3 justices that were rammed through the nomination process, who then use her own words to completely undermine your party's president. And, by the way, may have just cost him the next election. There's a lot of people out there who are very, very unhappy with this decision, who are voters, young voters, who might be thinking, you're not going to do anything for me, then I'm not going to do anything for you. Well, and that's disastrous when you're facing re-election. Just think about that. The next time you, try to undermine yourselves.